the Trikaya, or three bodies, or persons, or Purushas of the triune Godhead. First, second, and third person. The first person is the origin. The second person is the mediating medium of manifestation. The third person is the immanent, all-pervasive, in the heart, indwelling form of the same deity. Understood as first person, transcendent origin, second person, mediating, intermediate, emanating, or manifesting, and incarnating, second person, third person, immanent, Holy Spirit, or Paramatma in the heart of all beings. Now, in Pure Land Buddhism, this is called the doctrine of the Trikaya. In Christianity is the doctrine of the Trinity, the first, second, and third person, or so-called Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In Greek Platonic emanationism, and in Kabbalah, and so forth, we have Ili, the first person, Yahu, and his numerous forms, including his cosmic form as the universe, Virata Rupa, or Adam Kadman, amongst the Kabbalists, the giant cosmic form of the Lord. And the third person, which is their Holy Ruha, Holy Spirit, situated in the heart of all beings. You have the notes on this in Egypt. This is Hari, Asu, or Osiris, and Atum in the north, and Aten in the south, who is identified with Amen. These deity names, Aten and Amen, come through into the Hebrew as Adon, Adam, and Amen as the holy name, as the sacred affirmation. The name Amen is associated with the name of Aten in the north. This is very important. It's another name of Helios in the city of Heliopolis, and a name of the city of Heliopolis itself, which appears in Semitic sometimes as AVN. Since the in and the im are interchangeable, for instance, in the Hebrew word matan and the Hebrew word natan, then the A, V, or U, im, or in name of Heliopolis, which was sometimes translated as on, or om, O-M, or O-N, in the A-U-M-N form, appears two different ways. Expanded into two syllables, it is the name of God as Amen, which is related to Brahman. Contracted to one syllable, it is the name Om, A-U-M, or On, O-N. This is very important. Sometimes translators of ancient Semite say that the Hebrew translation of the city name Heliopolis was Aven, A-V-E-N. But the letters are actually A, V, or U, M, or N. So there again, we have a connection between Amen, Brahman, Om, and the city name of Heliopolis, and the by name of Helios as Amen or Om. This is also where we get the word ontos from, meaning to be, to exist, as in ontology. So when we talk about Hari, Vasu, and Atman, we understand there's a very, very amazing global relationship between the doctrines of Paramatma and the doctrines of Brahman. So even in Egypt, the two major centers and the major theological controversy throughout history was between the school of Heliopolis with its devotion to Atman and the school of Thebes in the south with its devotion to Amen. And at times they recognized that Atman is Brahman, that it's the same teaching. At other times they argued and fought about it because there was a personalism preserved to the doctrine of Paramatma that was lost in the doctrine of Brahman. And so we find that in the south there was a much greater tendency to devolve into impersonalism and forms of voidism and personalism and a polytheistic God worship, small g gods worshipped separate from a supreme personal being. The devolutions or corruptions of so-called Hinduism today, which are the results of thousands of years of Vaishnavism devolving. Those very same forms of corrupted Krishna-centric monotheism.
So Vaishnavism means like worship of Krishna?
Worship of Vishnu, yes, because we consider the non-Krishno-centric Vaishnavas, like the Rama Vaishnavas, they're also Vaishnavas. When I talk about Krishna-centric Vaishnavism, I'm talking about specifically that Vaishnavism that has come down to us through lineages like the Madhva Sampradaya and the Gaudiya Sampradaya.
But isn't that just a form of Hinduism?
First off, we have to understand that the term Hinduism is essentially it's a misnomer.
What,
but
like
there
the way
is
we
something,
call the Native Americans Indians type of thing? Or?
Well, yeah. I mean, our idea of Hinduism comes from the Muslims merging of everyone on the other side of the Sindhu River into one category, putting one label on them, Hindu. Sindhu, the Arabs said Hindu. So it would be analogous to saying that everyone in the United States right now belongs to the American religion. It doesn't exist. Now there is something which is so-called Hinduism or Hindu, which can be identified, which is a religious manifestation or expression which has devolved from Vaishnavism.
Even the Shivites?
Well, I wouldn't say that for all forms of Shaivism because, in fact, without necessarily devolving a specific sect of intense devotion to the second person of the Godhead, Lord Balaram or Vishnu, as Shiva, developed just as specific devotion to the Lord associated with the name Ptah in Egypt developed regionally into Buddhism. So in one sense, the sattvic theistic form of Shaivism, which is most closely related to Vaishnavism, is really, it's not a devolution, it's a legitimate, authentic development or evolution of a certain branch of Vaishnavism. It's a regional and cultural development, like Buddhism. Real Pure Land Buddhism is an authentic development from Vaishnavism. So it's not all devolution, but the Hinduism, which is no longer Vishnu-centric, or even for that matter, theistically Shiva-centric, which includes all of the Mayavadi groups, and the Mayavadi groups are the impersonalists, and they're related to the Voidist Buddhists. For
almost
them,
like spiritualized atheism.
well, that's exactly, it really is atheism, because they believe that there is no personal, ultimately no personal deity.
Or any person.
Or any individual persons as well. They think that the absolute is totally impersonal. Whether we're Vaishnavas or we're Catholics or we're Hermeticists who have a spiritual tradition going back to ancient Egypt, or we're Jewish Kabbalists, we have an understanding of Godhead, of a deity, that there's a plurality of persons in the deity. Or it may also be described as immanent theology. The deity eternally exists and is irreducible in terms of triune manifestation. So that the transcendent deity is simultaneously eternally manifesting, emanating, and the material worlds of incarnation may also be eternal, although any particular material world is temporary, but the entire material manifestation may be understood as eternal. And within those cosmic manifestations, the deity is also all-pervasive as the Holy Spirit or the Lord of the Heart, existing within the core of every form. So this Trikaya, as the Buddhists would call it, or Vishnu's two Trinity Rupani, from Svetas Avatara Upanishad and other places, the threefold form of Vishnu, either understood as Bhagavan or Adipurusha, Samkarshan Baladev, and their Atman, or immanent Holy Spirit, or understood as Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and Kyasuradakshai Vishnu. These Trinitarian understandings of the Vaishnava deity, the Pure Land Buddhist Adi Buddha, the Greek, Egyptian, and Jewish deity is Eliyahu and Aten or Atman. This understanding of the pervasive worship of this triune deity allows us to appreciate that the major racial families and linguistic families of the Indo-Europeans, the Semites, and the Egyptians or Africans all shared a primal revelation of a triune deity. It was the same deity. And of course, this triune deity was always worshipped with their Shekinah or Shakti, their complementary feminine. So that Helios is worshipped with Hecate in his original form as Chorus. He's worshipped with Rodha, which is Radha. Ili, or Yahu, in the Semitic world is worshipped with Shekinah, their uncreated feminine energy, divine energy. In Egypt, Hari, or Osiris, Asu, is worshipped with Sekhet, which is Shakti again. Of course, in Confucianism, it's heaven and earth. In Taoism, it's yin and yang. Yin is feminine, yang is masculine. In Pure Land Buddhism in Tibet, it's yab and yum. Yab is masculine, yum is feminine. In the Vedic context, it's Purusha and Prakriti. Vaishnavism, of course, has Hari and Shakti. In Shaivism, it's Hara and Shakti. So actually, this important name, HR, in Egypt, we see in South India, we see any place where Shiva is called Hara, we see that originally he is the HR deity as well. Now, Shiva is definitely, if you look at all of history carefully, the highest Shiva is clearly the same triune deity as the Vaishnavas. And specifically, the second person, Samkarshan, worshipped in his form as the renunciated and self-sacrificed Upadvaj Purusha. Lord Shiva representing God's self-sacrifice or renunciation personified. So Lord Shiva in Vaishnava scripture, he desires to see his origin, and it is revealed to him, in fact, that his origin is Lord Samkarshan, Lord Baladev. So, as a historian, I can trace out how Shaivism as a separated religion actually is connected to the specific sect of the worship of Lord Baladev or Samkarshan. So if you go to Canaan in the Bronze Age, or even earlier in the Levant or the Eastern Mediterranean area, you find that Baal is worshipped with his feminine manifestation and his expansions with her expansions.
So how come people when you talk about Dionysus, they always think of like drunken revelry,
That's
orgies
because
and stuff?
the abominable late left-hand tantric corrupt tradition of so-called Dionysus. There were many, many left-hand tantric so-called masters who were involved in the Maenad cults. The Maenads, our word maniac comes from Maenad. Okay.
But in the beginning, it wasn't derogatory, right? The Maenads, was it?
Oh yeah, with the Maenads, it always had the negative connotation. For instance, Jeffrey Wisely and Sandy Wisely said today the term nymphomaniac. Well, that's a word that has a long history. Where it comes from is that Rhoda's by name on rose was Nympha, which means lotus. Like Rhoda means rose, Nympha means lotus. This is where the iconology of Padma, or the lotus form of Shri, is importantly connected to the Rhodian tradition, or the mysticism of Radharani, who has a red dress and holds a red or pink flower. Now, Rhoda has her emanations, which are in the Greek world variously called nymphs, muses, the Horae, or seasons, H-O-R-A-E, H-O-U-R-I, which are the heavenly maidens of Muslim or Sufi mysticism, are also related. These muses, or nymphae, were the expansions of Nympha, or rather, Rhoda. Now, the term nymphomaniac comes from the corruption of the rasa dance, the corruption of the worship of Krishna and the gopis, or Koros, Helios, and the gopis, into the Mayanid, or maniac, left-hand tantric tradition, which was horribly abominable. They practiced, the eating of live victims, cannibalism, and horrible things in the name of religion. Anyway, that was the late tradition. The corrupted worship of Baal with the corrupted worship of Astarte is that diabolical form of extreme left-hand tantrism, the corrupt form, which modern non-Sattvic, Shaivite, and Shakta scholars assert is related to the worship of Dionysus, or the tantric Baal of the West Semites. So the left-hand tantric Shaivites and Shaktas, their scholars are way ahead of the Vaishnavas and the Sattvic devotees in understanding their connections to the Western traditions, because for decades some Shaivite scholars have been asserting that their Shiva is Dionysus. What we need to do is we need to reclaim our tradition and show how the original Sattvic Dionysus is Lord Balaram, and how these separated and devolved forms of Shaivism have originated in the Sattvic worship of Lord Balaram, or Samkarshan, and Shiva. Frightening. Read, I don't know if the book is called Shiva and Dionysus, but it's by Alain Danilou, a French scholar. And they actually are advocating that we should go back to human sacrifice and cannibalism. So we wouldn't have wars if we did it right. We went back to human sacrifice and cannibalism. And they're totally into this whole Dionysus Shiva connection. They've got it. They've got all the information. It's like the dark side of my whole work. But I actually can use their stuff tremendously to support my work, because they've done all the work, the groundwork to figure out all the connections. The problem is, you don't want to use their stuff, because every bit of information they're using is promoting and supporting the dark side.
What does this Ankh symbol signify?
Well, Lord Ananta Balaram, remember the Naga, is a form of Baal or Yahu, who in Egypt is called Asu, or the Greeks call him Osiris. Now, Yahu or Asu, which is in the south, WS or VS, which is Vasudev, which is the Mula Mantra name for Balaram. That's why we see in Israel and Judah that Baal is also called Yahu. Now, we Vaishnavas recognize that the giant Egyptian or Indian cobra is a form of Lord Samkarshan or Lord Baladev or Vasudev. And I believe that on the common icon of the Nahas or Naga in Egypt, he's frequently colored with bright reds, blues, or yellows, or sometimes green primary colors, because it's understood that Lord Balaram or Vishnu, Vasudev, is the source of the gunas, just as white light is the source of all colors. So that everything originates in him. And that's why the Urias, or the Naga that represents Lord Vasudev, is sometimes colored with the primary colors.
Red, white, and yellow?
Would be oftentimes red, blue, and yellow,
Red, blue.
but sometimes red, blue, and green. Anyway, now we see that in the Aten icon that the Naga, who is also called Sheshita in later Egypt, and who is Nahas in Hebrew, is often attached to, or what's coming from him, is the Ankh symbol. The Ankh symbol is the cross of Purusha as Upadvaja. In the Vedic system, the self-sacrifice of the Virata Rupa, or cosmic form of Purusha, in the Vedic hymn, the Rig Vedic hymn Purusha Sukta, and in all of the Vedic tradition derived from the revelation of the self-sacrifice of Purusha, the instrument of Purusha's cosmic self-sacrifice is the Yupa stake or cross. Purusha is called Upadvaj, which means that his emblem or flag, his eternal representative, is actually the instrument of his own self-sacrifice, the Yupa. Yupa is what the instrument of self-sacrifice of Purusha is called. It's what the Vedic sacrificial system affixed the sacrificial victims to, was a Yupa stake, or sometimes considered to be a cross. Now, this is why the Westerners and the Catholics and in the mystery schools, they identified the cross symbol, or the Y symbol sometimes, and the Yupa symbol, with the self-sacrifice of the cosmic Purusha. It's why in Christianity today, the cross is still the symbol of the Lord's own cosmic self-sacrifice. The atonement for sin is completely embedded in this sacrificial system, because in the Vedic age, these Purusha commemorative sacrifices were actually performed as an intercessory or atoning sacrifice on the behalf of rulers and nations. Exactly the same way that the Hebrews, Israelites, and Jews thought to perform their religious sacrifices as a commemoration of the atoning sacrifice revealed to them by God. So the Ankh cross, which has survived coming all the way through ancient Egyptian mysticism into Coptic Catholicism, and actually even traveled up to to Ireland in Celtic spirituality, that Ankh cross represents Ananta Balaram, or Bal Yahu, as the cosmic Purusha, whose self-sacrifice redeems the cosmos and at-ones or atones, reunites souls to God. So prominently in the Aten icon, the giant Egyptian cobra will be attached to the Ankh cross, which reveals him, Lord Ba or Yahu, as the cosmic sacrifice, as our Redeemer, and also as the original spiritual master, because the spiritual master takes the sins of the disciples. So originally the cosmic or ultimate spiritual master, original spiritual master, takes all the sins of all the worlds. So now we see the ray hands extending from Hari and Shesha, Hari and Anantanaga. Those ray hands are a pun, a pictorial pun. At the end of those rays there is a hand, and each hand holds another Ankh cross. In the rest of Egyptian iconography, those hands extend the cross of redemption, of eternal life, to all beings, all souls, not just the king and queen, but all beings. The hands, the ray hands of Hari or Shesha, extend to all living things, in fact, to all creation. Now, the little Ankh crosses represent the all-pervasiveness of the Spirit of God. This is where we get the term Aten in the south, in the Thebes and Amarna period. It's related to the Atum, A-T-U-M, as it's translated from Heliopolis in the north thousands of years earlier. That term, name of God, is Atum, is Atman, or Atma. And it is specifically a name associated with the all-pervasive form of God. This is why hymns to Aten or Amen and Atum say things like, no one can see you, no one can sculpt your form, you are the hidden Lord, you are looking out at us from every place, you see all but none can see you.
What was that term, Appa?
Yes. The deity name HP, or aspirate P or B, in northern Egypt during the Heliopolitan era, the triune deity of Hap Soker Ptah, worshipped at Memphis, is extremely important because Appa, or Hapi, as he's sometimes translated, whose other form is called NHL or NHR or Narayan, for whom ancient Egypt was named. When we see a translation like Misraim for ancient Egypt, it was Narayan. That's where we get Nazarene from. Nazarene is a late derivative from the term Naharayim. We know that Naharayim is the same name as Narayana because linguists have translated Naharayim as of the waters, saying it was the name of ancient name of Mesopotamia because it was the region of the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. So they translate Naharayim as of the waters. Well, son of God or of God, Nara meaning man or son of man, meaning Krishna or Hari who incarnates born of man, or Nara being the pun meaning waters. It's a pun, man and waters in Sanskrit, is why there are two traditional interpretations of the name Narayana, meaning of, from, or related to man, son of man, or of, from, or related to water. Now in Hebrew, nar means man, and nahar means water. So when we look at...
Sanskrit, man is nara.
Yes, and nar is water.
Wow.
So
It's like almost the same language.
exactly what I'm saying here is that over and over and over again, not borrowed things, not late accretions to the language, but core words and concepts in Hebrew and the rest of the Semitic languages are so close to the Sanskrit. This totally violates everything we were taught. We are taught that the Indo-European languages, the Semitic languages, and the African or Egyptian languages have nothing to do with each other. That they develop practically in a vacuum.
So is that why there's that pseudo-Aryan
Exactly.
sort of hatred for like Jews and stuff?
Well, it's part of it. The Aryanists have suppressed.
Well, they're the pseudo-Aryans.
Yeah, right. The racist Aryanists have suppressed for over 100 years the proper comparative study of Semitic languages, Indo-European languages, and African languages. Because in their world, they can't bear the idea of comparing what they think of as white European high culture and race with the Semites or the Africans, the darker peoples. Of course, this is why the racist Aryans had to assert that some white folks invaded North India and all high civilization in India is actually derivative from these white Aryan Caucasoid invaders.
Yeah, luckily that theory is dissipated.
Yes, exactly. But what people in India have to understand is that the entire oppression of India and corruption forced on India by this racist Aryanist idea has its parallel in how the very same racist Aryanists denied, corrupted, and misrepresented Semitic tradition and accomplishment and African religion and accomplishment. So in other words, we know as Vaishnavas how the racist Aryanists misrepresented Vaishnavism and denied it. What we don't realize is that a lot of what we think we know about Egyptian tradition or Semitic tradition has also been fed to us through the same racist Aryanist system. So the African devotees, the Semitic devotees, the Indian devotees, they've all got a corrupted, profoundly corrupted idea of each other's history and tradition because they've all got it from these racist Aryanists, these Europeans who dominated everybody's academic traditions, dominated our modern sciences, especially the social sciences, the comparative study of language, all the sociological studies, archaeology, anthropology, all the social studies were dominated by the racist Aryanists.
So what about, like, doesn't it seem like there is a real strong Jewish academia? Were they never in these fields? Like, because you have, like, they seem to be the leaders of, like, we have Freud, Einstein, all these guys. So weren't there any Jewish scholars who were discovering the falsity of these racist theories?
First off, you have to be careful when you think about Jewish scholarship. Yes, whether you're a practicing Orthodox Jew or you're a totally secular Jew or non-religious Jew, as if there could be such a thing, but this is a racist conception of Judaism. For instance, the case of Freud, or so many other personalities, you have to be very careful, because just because they're nominally Jewish does not mean they're representing an authentic Jewish historical or spiritual perspective. And like we know that so many modern secular Jews that are not, representing either Orthodox Judaism or the history of Judaism. They're purely secular Jews, and their interest in a Jewish state is a purely secular interest, a mundane interest.
Yeah, so obviously they wouldn't be able to find.
Yeah, they're not even looking for it.
Yeah.
They don't care. The other thing is that we have great amount of scholarship that has been done by specialists in the individual traditions. I use all their work. I pay obeisances to them. Their strength is that they're specialists who have focused in their own field, in their own cultures, their own traditions, or an area of their own expertise, and they've learned as much as they can learn without the outside context. But what I bring to it is that I have done an interdisciplinary work that considers the evidence from many different disciplines or fields, and I have studied these traditions comparatively. So because it's necessary to study them comparatively in order to get the context to see the big picture. So the best Egyptologist in the world, or the best Semitic studies scholar in the world, is not going to discover commonalities between Egyptian monotheism and Jewish monotheism unless they study them comparatively. To make a comparison, you have to have more than one thing. You have to have two things to compare. And when we try to compare only using prejudicial, biased examples, like Vaishnavas comparing their pristine sattvic devotion to Radha and Krishna to the most corrupted, least realized forms of Christianity, or vice versa, very pious Christians or Jews comparing their monotheism to the most corrupted forms of Hinduism and left-hand Tantrism, it's not a fair playing field. We've got people that are comparing the best and the authentic core of a tradition, of one tradition, with the worst and the most devolved forms of the other tradition. Mm-hmm. So what we have to do is we have to actually look at those things that are comparable. We're going to have to study bridal mysticism in this tradition comparatively with bridal mysticism in that tradition. And this works for the evil stuff too. When you carefully analyze the corrupt forms of so-called Hinduism, guess what? You find the very same thing in Judea, in Egypt, and in the Mediterranean, in the Greek Isles. So in this particular work I've done, I haven't just pulled the golden thread and been able to trace different particular sects of devotion to Hari or Vasudeva and Shekinah around the planet. I've done that. But I've also been able to trace their exact adversarial traditions. Because the dark side's always there with the light side. Always. Matter of fact, arguing negatively, you could actually prove my whole thesis about the worship of Hari and Shekinah just by looking at the corrupt traditions that have spun off from it in all these different places. You can actually you can prove the positive by the connections between the negative. Mm-hmm. You've got Ketu, who is the enemy of creativity, the enemy of life in this tradition, and you have Setu, who is Ketu, who is catabolism, who is the enemy of life in the Western tradition. Eternal enmity against Krishna and the Devas is Ketu, Rahu Ketu. That's why there is a Hebrew word, Ra, which means evil. And that's why Chetu in Hebrew, or Keta, means evil or sin. Because it's what they call associative or derivative meaning, because it's sin which causes death. It's sin which causes disease. It's sin which causes the catabolism or the ketubalism, catastrophe of the world. And why the devil is called the father of lies. He's catachresis, which means to take the truth and twist it around. So in this way, we can see you have anabolism and you have catabolism. You have catastrophe. You have catachresis. And the keta in Hebrew is sin, and ra in Hebrew is evil. And all of these things come together with the corrupt cult of Setu in Egypt, who is Ketu, Rahu Ketu.
So what about the Ra of Egypt?
That's where, just like, see, these things are very amazing. Good question. Because everybody's going to ask these questions. In the Vedic context, there's a big problem because a Vedic name of Vishnu is, one of Vishnu's very ancient names is Ashura. Okay. Now, the word for a demon from the root sura, which is a dialectical form of Hari, with the negative prefix asura, really means a demon, or someone who's opposed to Sura, opposed to Hari, opposed to God. But Ashura, which
that's a different word,
which is Asura, Asura, the Vedic Asura is not from the root Sura with a negative prefix, it's from the root As with a Ra on the end of it.
But is it the S, the same S? Or
It doesn't matter whether it's the same S.
Oh.
It doesn't, because you have, when you're writing and you look at ancient traditions like this, you find that the cognate name of Vishnu as Asura in the Iranian, or the Proto-Iranian of the Zend-Avesta, the Zoroastrian tradition, is Ahura.
So they got it all wrong when they try and say it's Asura, and that they worshipped the Asuras and demonized the deities.
Yes, the problem about Zoroastrianism is totally cleared up when you realize, like in The Dawn and Twilight of Zoroastrianism, a very good work by Zainer, he clearly says right in there that Ahura Mazda is Purusha. There's no question about it. Well, Purusha's Vedic name, one of his Vedic names, is Ashura. From the root as, vas, which means to be, to exist, to dwell, who is the great I am, the supreme being, soul of the universe. You go to any Sanskrit dictionary, you'll find Ashura, Vishnu, soul of the universe, the supreme being.
So what's the Ra?
Now, how we understand this from the Western tradition is this. If Purusha is Ashura, and Ashura is Ahura, when we go to ancient Nineveh, to the Assyrian capital, the Supreme Lord is worshipped there mostly under the name Ashur. Other scholars now are connecting Ahura with Ashur. Now, in some of the stuff we've got here, like on this first page, after the Aten symbol, you can understand from work that's being done on Semitic religions that there is a connection between Ashur and Yahu, or Eli. I'll say the solar Ashur is related to Eli, or Baal. Now, so there we've got that link connected there by other scholars. Now, remember the root is As, Vas, Ush, and so forth. Like, for instance, the Ash in Asura is the Ush in Purusha. It's the same as Vasu. Okay, now, there are two names of the Hebrew deity, Eli or Yahu. One is Asarayahu, which means Azar is Yahu. The other is Azariel, which means Azar is Eli. And there's a third one, actually, that's Eliezer, which means Eli is Azar. Now, there's not an S there, there's a Z there used for that. Sometimes an S is used for it, too. So, now we're closing in on who this supreme being, soul of the universe is. We go to Egypt. In the north, the root name of Osiris is Asu, or As, or
and Osiris
Os.
is a Greek pronunciation.
Because there was an expanded name with the Ra name on the end of it. So when the R or L name is first, so-called Heru is Ra.
So how come Ra is a bad thing?
No, it's not. It's not bad.
Hebrew.
I'm getting to explain that. The name was only written with the R or the L, the aspirate R, the aspirate L. That makes it Ili, Hili, or Hari, Ari, Ori, Uri, and so on and so forth. The R and L are interchangeable. Name wasn't Ra, it was Hari. Now, when the Ra name, a variant form, you could say, is as the Ra name, but the Ra name had no separate existence originally from the Hari name. Now, that's why the city of Ra was the city of Hari or Horus. It was the same place. Now, when the HR or the RL name is on the beginning of the compound name, we get Horus, or Helios, or Eliyahu, or Surya. So many different forms of it. Koros, Eros, Kyrios, many different forms. Helios. Now, when the R name is on the end and the Asu name is first, you get Asur. HRUS was also worshipped as ASR. It's just inverting the two names in the compound. So Asur is Horus. Now,
so about Ashur Banipal.
Well, that element, the theophoric element of that name is Ashur, is the deity name Ashur.
So that was a king, right?
Oh, and many kings, because in the
Paul means like Lord.
Yeah, ruling in Nineveh, Assyrian lords, kings, had the name Ashur. Of course, the worship of Ashur became very corrupt at one point, so we have to remember that. Now, so now we're over in Egypt, and we understand that the deity As, or Vas, or Us, who is the Hebrew Yahu, when he's worshipped with Ra, or Hari, they call him Asur. That's the Greek Osiris. So now we see in Greece, the word for masculine being, who is, to exist, to dwell, to be, is ousios, or os, or us. On the end of all Greek deity names, if you see IAS, IUS, IOS, or OS, or US, it means masculine being who is. This is extremely important.
So that immediately identifies it as a form of God.
Exactly. But what happened was, impersonalism, under impersonal influences, it became just a generic masculine being who is. It was no longer understood as a theophoric element in the name, but it was now understood just as any masculine being who is. Regardless of the fact that dozens and dozens, scores and scores of Greco-Roman deity names all, without exception, end in IAS, IUS, or IOS. Just like the scores of Hebrew deity names that end with Yahu. And how do we know it means to be, to exist, to dwell? Because the English word is. It's coming from the Latin essa, which is related to the Greek os or osios in the masculine form, which means is, to be, to exist, to dwell. The essence, the soul of the universe.
Wow.
This is Yahu. And this is Osiris. This is Asur in Egypt, Osiris in Greece, Sarayahu, Asariel, Eleazar in Judea, Ashur in Nineveh, Ahura amongst the Persians, Zoroastrians, and the pre-Zoroastrian Medes, Zervanites, and so forth, and Vishnu Ashura, or Purusha, in India. This is so profoundly important. Then when we go to the early Sumerian and Akkadian, the early Eastern Semites, or Mesopotamia down in Ur and in Babylon, one of the important bynames of Marduk, the so-called solar deity of Babylon, who the Jews conspired with to overthrow the Neo-Babylonians, his name is Asaru. So now we have the full picture. Asur is Osiris, is Asariel, Asarayahu, is Asher, is Ahura, is Asaru, is Asura, is Purusha. As a same deity, and it's the soul of the universe. It's Yahu, the great I am, the one who is. The English word is directly cognate with this name.
So they basically misidentify in the Egyptian and Greek traditions and just say all these are various minor deities.
Yeah, they think they're all different gods. They're totally blinded by Hindu mentality of the polytheism. And once you lose the vision of the monotheism and it devolves into that polytheism, it's almost impossible to sort it out.
And then they're basing it all on the basically later Greek era,
Corrupt.
almost like heresies
Yes.
of the ancient Greek religions.
Yes.
And
Now
weren't you
about
telling
Ra.
me there was one? So who was the great Greek thinker who basically wanted to ban the
The Platonists. The Platonists
Why?
wanted to ban the reading of recitation of Homer in the Greek city-states because they said Homer was not a spiritual master. These are not scriptures. These are popular fictions, and they blaspheme God and the Devas.
And then, so am I correct in understanding that modern scholar academia takes those texts and bases their whole understanding of ancient
Yes.
Greek religion
Yes.
on the very so-called scriptures that are considered heresies by the ancient Greeks?
Yes, and way beyond that, our corrupt notion of how Indo-European mythology relates, with which we've been being fed for over 100 years now, that Zeus is Indra, so on and so forth.
What about the whole
they are
term
correct.
mythology doesn't come from the Sanskrit word mithya, which means to lie?
No, what it comes from is that actually the term mythology or mythos, was used for a story that was told to try to explain some mysterious phenomenon, whether it was a natural phenomenon or it was an artifact or a temple, an abandoned altar, or some amazing natural or human-created or supernatural thing. When you didn't have Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, an initiated order to explain it to you properly,
So
what you had to
Guru is
settle for was a myth.
So Guru is the teacher, Shastra is the scriptures.
Yes. Sadhu is the
Sadhu is-
tradition of the saints. Okay, so now back to Ra, Hebrew Ra. I started mentioning this to give you an example of the profound problem with the confusion of Ahura as a Sura, a demon. Okay? Sometimes in history, you have words that are very similar, and between linguistic groups, or even dialects within a single linguistic group, you have tremendous confusion, confounding occur. Now, in Hebrew, there are two words that are very, very closely related. And one is Ra, which is sometimes transliterated as R-A-A-H, which means evil. And the other is Ra, R-A-H, or R-H, or R-A-A-H, in many different forms, which is also Ra-Yahu, sometimes transliterated R-E-I, or R-A-I, or R-A-Y-A, which means God sees. Now this is another one of these amazing Hebrew-Egyptian connections, because what is the preeminent symbol of Hari as Ra?
The eye, all-seeing eye.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
picture.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
On the top, the Horus or Ra eye. The one below it is the Hari eye of Lokeshvar in Pure Land Buddhist context. However, the eye in Egypt is a hieroglyph for both the name Hari and the name Ra. Now, when we go over to the Jewish scriptures and we find the Hebrew name Rayahu, or Rai, or Raya, or Ra, it literally translates Yah sees. So the all-seeing eye of Hari or Ra is Yah who sees, Raya. And it's confounded with Ra, who is actually Rahu. See? So when words are very, very close and sometimes identical, as we could say they were two, and two, 2TO, 2TWO, and TOO. They sound exactly the same, but they have totally different meanings.
And someone without the context would totally misunderstand.
That's why you have to have Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu. You'll have to have the Guru and the tradition of the saints to explain the scripture. If
Isn't
you
it
don't,
fun?
you get mixed up.
And isn't it an odd phenomenon I notice in academia is that they'll have like an odd phenomenon in academia is they'll have these so-called secular scholars who actually claim to have more insight and understanding of a religious tradition than
Right.
the actual followers of that tradition.
Right. They're completely outsiders.
Yeah.
They have no realization at all.
Yeah, and they have no inside into the whole thing, and then they're in these huge colleges, teaching people this stuff, and then someone who's from that tradition, he's not even welcome, to come say what his tradition's about.
Right.
It's kind of an odd thing there.
Connection, for instance, between the properly understood sacred word in context and the corruption of the holy name or sacred word in the devolved traditions. This is a very important subject because not only do we see that Asura Vishnu or Ahura was diabolized as Asura in the controversy between Zoroastrianism and its other related Vedic religions, but we see that the name Baal in the West Semitic context became so misused at one point that it became completely diabolized and was put away, anathema, and no longer used by the Yahoo worshippers at all. In the same way, the root ST or SD means sacred or holy or good, as in the Hebrew tzad, T-S-A-D or T-Z-A-D, and the Sanskrit sad or sat means good. Whereas dialectical form of Ketu in Egypt as Setu confounded Setu with Sat, giving rise to the a misunderstanding and confounding of the evil Setu or Ketu with the Seth of Jewish tradition, and also with the Tzad of Jewish tradition and the Sat of Indian tradition. So late Satan comes from Setu, the Egyptian Setu. And Setu was Ketu, the enemy of the Devas and Krishna, Ketu Rahu. So the story about the casting down of Ketu Rahu in the story of the Amrita, that whole story is actually related to the casting of Satan out of heaven. Now what happens? Satan is cast out of heaven down into the earth, where his minions become the cause of disease and temptation and corruption in the world. Catabolism, death, disease, and everything in the universe, the fall and the affliction that's related to Satan and his minions are all in the Vaishnava tradition related to the enmity between Rahu Ketu and Vishnu and the Devas. So there you have your theology of a force or principle that's adversarial against the God of life and goodness in the universe. That universal principle, made the dark side of the force, not triumph. That dark side, that force that tends to corruption, untruth, disease, degradation, temptation, sin, all of those things, that is the principle that's universal. It's found in Vaishnava tradition and cosmology and theology, and it's found in the Egyptian and the Jewish and the Greek and so forth. That's where we get all these terms like catabolism from. So that's the point. You have to be very, very careful about names like Baal, because at one point Baal means Yahoo, means Balaram, God, which is, all of these things are very interesting from the standpoint of the association of Baal or Balaram, Samkarshan, Vishnu, Vasudeva, with sattvic religion, with everything that is good and holy in authentic Vaishnavism. And the corruption of Baal or Balaram in the very late left-hand tantric traditions shows us that the worship of Baal with Hari or Krishna is related to a period of time prior to the corruption of the worship of Baal or Yahoo in the Semitic context. Because they're all connected. All these groups of devotees were connected. What we can understand from this is one very, very important thing, and that's that in India we have a problem with dating the worship of Radha and Krishna and Balaram. So many scholars working on Hinduism, but whatever evidence have they come up with that's conclusive for the very, very early worship of Radha and Krishna and Balaram? In fact, for the worship of Radha and Krishna and Balaram at all as the source of the entire tradition. Whatever the problem is, the evidence has not been accumulated or understood or presented properly. That's why it's such a big deal. Scholars make such a big thing out of something like the Heliodorus column. These small little bits of evidence. They say, oh, here's proof that Krishna and Balaram, Vasudeva, Samkarshan were worshipped together 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. The evidence they have from coins and so forth, staters of Vasudeva, Bactrian coins. Little bits of evidence that they have that show, that give corroboration for the early worship of Krishna Balaram in India. But regardless of what evidence they have or don't have in India, the whole rest of the Mediterranean region, the Greek Isles, Africa, the Levant, Mesopotamia, down in Sumer and Akkad, is absolutely, totally full of an endless treasure trove of information that absolutely, without a doubt, proves that this original revelatory tradition was Krishna-centric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's interesting. One of my favorite Vedic scholars and authors, Rajaram. I like his books and stuff, but he's from that school of thought. It's very Indo-centric, and he's completely convinced that Radha was never a historical figure, and there was never. It's like a very, very late addition to the whole Hindu religion.
See?
But basically, I think he would be amazed if he could show him. Look, wait a minute. If Radha's a myth, then if that tradition's just a recent addition, then why is it so anciently found in Greece?
You know how ancient it is? The story about Rodha as the bride of Helios is, there are two traditions on this, of the islands of Helios that rose out of the Mediterranean. Two traditions. One is that Helios sacred island rose during the battle between the Titans and the Devas, the gods. Well, what is that related to? That's related to the churning of the cosmic ocean. That's Padmar Shri, which is in late myth identified as Aphrodite or Venus rising out of the milk ocean. Okay? But one of the islands of Helios in the Mediterranean is considered to have arisen at the beginning of the cosmos, or at least the beginning of this cosmic order, in the battle between the Titans and the gods. Now, this is what the scholars would talk about, dealing with legendary time.
Hey, do you have any cash? We could give it back to you. A couple of
I might have $3.
Okay.
Okay. In other words, we're talking about not only prehistory, but we're talking about legendary time here. That an island rose out of the causal waters, and this island is related with the place, the theology of place, Ladini Shakti of Helios. Now, the specific story about the island of Rhodes is very amazing. There are actually 3 or 4 different versions of it. They're all myths. They're late interpretations.
Well, I just wanted to say something real fast. There must have been, because you don't hear much, like I never heard much about the island of Rhodes until I met you, but there obviously must be a Western tradition for that island, because one of the first states in America is Rhode Island, and we have Rhodes scholars. So there must. Right. So why are they attracted to it?
Okay, I'll explain that in a minute. Now, again, we're dealing with how ancient is the worship of Radha and Krishna. We're not talking transcendental now, but we're just going to say, prove it historically on the planet. Mm-hmm. How ancient is this worship, or thought to be is this worship? Okay. The island of Rhodes, as far back as any human memory goes, amongst the Semites, the Egyptians, or the Europeans, its legendary origin. Remember, I just mentioned the previous story about an island sacred to Helios rising. But there are several different myths about the rising of the island of Rhodes. Rodha, it's actually the island itself, is called the bride of Helios. We know that the Rhodon, the symbol of the island of Rhodes, is the symbol of Rhoda and Helios on the island of Rhodes. We know that Rhoda was also called Nympha, which is lotus, which is why the lotus is the ever-present representation of Rhoda in unity with Vishnu. That's why all Buddhist icons have Buddha, or any form of Buddha, always in unity with his lotus. Okay? Now,
and the Catholic churches always have
a rose window, right, which represents Mary as the mystical rose, who is the consort of God, the Shekinah. Now, what is the essence of all of the myths about the island of Rhodes? It says that that island, when it appeared out of the primal waters, now first you get the idea of an island appearing out of the water, either because it came up from the water, or one of the traditions is that in the great flood that God sent to, the Matsya story, or the Noah's Ark story, which in the Greek world is the story of Deucalion. And he and the ark are saved by Helios Delphinos, Helios in his giant dolphin form, which is Matsya. Just like Helios Kilamos. Helios Kilamos is his tortoise form, it's Kurma.
Wow.
So
basically,
all the real avatars are all there.
Well, so in the Vedic, that'd be a whole nother thesis.
Yeah.
Because in the Vedic culture, then the great flood, Krishna came as a great fish, Matsya, and so then you're saying in the Greek they had Dolphinus.
Oh, it's all there. All in the cultus of Helios. I have in the booklet here, I have it, all the Das avatars from the Heliopolitan tradition. It's
I
on
got
the
to
second
point
page or
that
something.
out.
Right. Now, in the myth that deals with the Great Flood story, the island of Rhodes appears out of the waters after the Great Flood, and Helios takes her for his bride. So, in any one of the various myths that are involved, that island, or those Mediterranean islands, including Crete, because the story about Crete is that after the Great Flood, Helios Delphinos pulled by the anchor rope, the colonizers of Crete to the island of Crete, and that's how human beings got to the island of Crete, with the great Minoan culture. Okay, now Rhodes...
They always have dolphins in their artwork.
Rhodes was a trading partner. Rhodes was part of the Minoan alliance. All of those islands, like Sicily, all the way to Rome, to the area later Italy, Sicily, which is at the toe of the boot. Sicily was one of Helios' sacred islands. All of those islands in the Mediterranean once all belonged to Helios, and all had different stories. And there were 3 or 4 of those islands that were sanctuaries, where it was illegal to kill any animal. They were complete asylums, and they had sacred white cows and white, just about everything that was white that was brought there as the sacred to Helios. White horses, white cows, white birds, hansas, geese, swans, so on and so forth. In any event, Helios' various sanctuary islands, on one of those islands, the island of Rhoda, is the place where he ruled. That was his supreme original capital. And that island was named for his Ladini Shakti, Rhoda. And Rhoda is called the bride of Helios. And how long has that island been the capital of Krishna Rhoda worship, Koros Rhoda worship in the Mediterranean region? Since the island came into existence. Since it either came up from the ocean in the struggle of the Titans and the gods, or since it appeared from the Great Flood. So this is what, when scholars say, this is legendary, this island has always been the center of Rhoda Koros Helios worship.
So what is this again?
This is a reconstruction of the trading done on a Greek trading vessel that was sunk in the 14th century. And on it were goods from various cultures.
That's BC.
Yes, 14th century BC. This is roughly during the Amarna period. That these ships traded between these various centers in the Mediterranean. And the objects found on this boat and on other wrecks have showed the trading partners, who they were. So we know that when there was commerce going on, countries had treaties with each other when there was commerce going on. You know, parts of members of different alliances or leagues or federations. And those were the first federations or alliances, international alliances, were all Heliopolitan. They were the worshippers of Hari or Vasudeva or Vishnu, the one God of all. So that map's wonderful because it actually shows from these marine archaeological finds, these shipwrecks, who was trading with who. It's like a frozen in time snapshot of some of these alliances.
Neat.
So I thought when you're discussing all this stuff, you can use that map and that will give people an idea of what area we're talking about because it shows right on there Amarna, Rhodes, Sicily, and these other important centers that were trading with each other.
Okay.
Okay, so one of the important things to bring out when you're discussing this is that this is the Trinity. That Eliyahu Adon Trinity, which comes through into Christianity versus the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I'll give you this quicker roll down for you. Easiest to say first, second, and third person. Person comes from Purusha. Of Trinity. Or Godhead. So there's that. This is the Egyptian Ariasuatum, which is Aten in the late south. Remember at Heliopolis, the all-pervasive form of the Lord is worshipped as Atum. Atum in the north was Amen in the south. Late becomes Aten in the south.
So how does the Brahman Paramatma Bhagawan?
Oh, this is really, yeah. Well,
This is off the subject.
yeah. Well, it is, but it isn't. I mean, it's all part of the same thing. When Paramatman is identified with Brahman, that's the theological formula that compares the theology, for instance, in Heliopolis in the northern Egypt, with the theology of Atum in the north, with the theology of Amen in the south. Because the one is the theology of Paramatma, and the other is the theology of the immanent form of the Lord as Brahman. Amen is Brahman. Amenism, or Brahmanism, was more easily corrupted into impersonalism than Atmaism. Because in the north, Atmaism was always closely associated with the worship of Rodan Karos in Heliopolis. An important point to bring out in this that I don't have any in this stuff is I'm talking about Heliopolis as being a very powerful early center of this Trinitarian worship of Hari, Vasudeva, and Atman. Now, the city of Heliopolis, which was the pre-dynastic and early dynastic center of this worship of Heru the elder or Hari in North Egypt, was always identified as being related to the prehistoric Minoan, you might say, or Greek world worship of Rhoda and Karos on the island of Rhodes. Because it's the son of Rhoda and Karos named Actus, according to so-called mythology, who had slain his brother and was exiled. This is one story. of how Heliopolis got founded. He had slain his brother and he was exiled from the whole sacred island of Rhodes. And in penance and in separation from Radha and Krishna, from his mother and father, he founded the city of Heliopolis in Egypt and dedicated it to their worship. So there you have your prehistoric connection.
What was the name of the show Jeffrey Armstrong was on?
Into the unknown. Exploring the unknown.
Okay.
It's on tonight too.
There we have our direct connection of all the Heliopolitan tradition that flows from that we can historically trace. Not that it's the origin, mind you, because the Semites had the same religion, the Egyptians, the Greeks, they all had the same religion, but there we see a direct connection between the mysticism of Radha and Koros and their hierophant, their high priest and initiator into the mysteries. On the island of Rhodes, we get the direct connection between Rhodes and Heliopolis. The Heliopolitan tradition is revived by Akhenaten and his relatives in the late 18th dynasty. In this book, what you see are late 18th dynasty icons. That
This book here?
Yes. These late 18th dynasty icons that you see throughout this presentation are directly connected to the icons which were the official emblems of the religious states of Judah and Israel. So we follow this direct connection down through thousands of years, from Catholic back into Greco-Egyptian and Jewish monotheism, back to Egyptian monotheism and early Semitic monotheism, back to the Minoan and the prehistoric Greek monotheism, and all of it goes right back to the worship of Rhoda and Koros and Dionysus on the island of Rhodes, the sacred island of Rhodes. It all derives from there.
So in any other cultures like India, who would Rhoda and Koros and Dionysus be?
Well, in our Indian manifestation of this global and cosmic revelatory tradition, I'm not saying this came from India, and I'm not saying that India came from Egypt or the Semites or anybody else. I'm saying that when we push back the limits of our ability to uncover this information into the prehistoric era in each one of these regions, we find that the original revelatory tradition of the worship of God who is giving and receiving love, Purusha and Prakriti, that the origin of that primal revelatory faith is the worship of Radha and Krishna and Balaram, who in the Semitic culture are Hari or Ili, and Yahu, who is also called Baal, and their Shekinah, who is Shakti. In the Greek world, this Helios, Rhoda, his Shakti, and Koros, and their hierophant or initiator into their, or master of their mysteries, Dionysus, who is Balaram, is Deva Nyasa, the Lord of anointing or initiation, or the Messiah. Nisya's Messiah.
Thank you.